This is all that's left. A small plot of land in southwest Tulare County. A few dried up fields and a dozen or so vacant buildings. On one side of Highway 43 are rows of cotton plants. On the other is what's left of an experiment.
Yeah, it was an experiment. Maybe didn't work out as great as they would have liked, but here we are 110 years later, we're still talking about it. We're still fascinated about it.
This is Allensworth State Park, a former utopian community started by a man named Colonel Allen Allensworth.
Allensworth was, again, the only town in California fully financed, governed, built, designed, and populated by African Americans. It's the only one like it in California.
Between 1909 and 1918, Allensworth was home to several hundred African Americans, most of which were former Buffalo soldiers.
We call them Buffalo soldiers to separate them from the units that were all black during the Civil War, because they were a little bit different. These were professionals.
Buffalo soldiers helped the U.S. Army tame the West. Park interpreter Steve Tomey says that when those soldiers retired, Colonel Allensworth encouraged many of them to move on to his 800-acre colony.
So as the residents came here, they opened up businesses. Many of them were entrepreneurs.
Colonel Allensworth was a highly respected Army chaplain. Born a slave in Louisville, Kentucky, Allensworth escaped the South by joining the Union as a nurse, then rising in the ranks to become a chaplain.
When he retired in 1906, he was the highest-ranking African-American officer in the U.S. Army as a lieutenant colonel.
After his honorable discharge, Colonel Allensworth bought some land along the railroad in Tulare County, and then recruited African Americans from all over the country to start businesses. This community here, they were sort of segregating themselves.
Correct. To prove a point. And they were doing it to say, we're gonna prove this town is viable with black-only owned enterprise and labor and capital.
For the first 5 years, the town of Allensworth did prove to be prosperous. Farming was good, the town had several stores, and kids were in schools and libraries. But that was only the first 5 years.
And then the colonel's killed in 1914. He's killed in Monrovia, California. As he's trying to cross the street, he's struck down by a motorcyclist.
After the colonel's death, outside communities started taking advantage of Allensworth. And the first thing to happen was their water rights were taken from them.
The town had the water rights, and then they failed to pay their taxes on time, and another company swoops in, buys it out from under them.
World War I also had a big impact on the town, and many of the men in Allensworth left to fight overseas, leaving few to run the farms or businesses.
And the reason that the town failed or the colony failed, and I hate to use that word because, yes, it did fail, but at the same time, there's still a town of Allensworth here.
Times were tough, but descendants of the original town did continue to live in Allensworth up to the 1970s. And this is what's left. This is what the California State Parks continues to preserve. The town, the history, and Colonel Allensworth's name.
You know, his name and his legacy lives on. It's always going to be preserved. We're on the National Register of Historic Places. We're a California historical landmark.
From the historic utopia of Allensworth in Tulare County, I'm John Bartell.